Hello, welcome to GM Crypto with the CoinFund team. We've spent years as a multi-strategy investment firm focused on blockchain, so join us to unpack complex ecosystem trends and hear from the founders shaping the future of Web3. Please subscribe to this podcast and follow us on Twitter at CoinFund_IO. Please note that none of the following should be taken as investment advice. See coinfund.io/disclaimers for more important information.
Hello, my name is Christopher Perkins, and I'm the president of CoinFund. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Henson Orser, CEO, and Deepa Raja Carbone, managing director and vice chairperson of VARA, which is the virtual assets regulatory authority based in Dubai. Welcome, Henson and Deepa.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Awesome. As we begin, could you please share your personal backgrounds and your roles at VARA? Maybe Henson, do you want to kick off?
Sure. I was in financial services for over 25 years, and my last stint was at Nomura Securities. While I was there, we had spun off Crypto Custodian in partnership with CoinShares and Ledger. And in 2020, I went over to Komainu to be president and acting CEO. While I was there for a couple of years, we began the licensing process with VARA. And I stepped down to be a strategic advisor to Komainu. And that was when Deepa and I started to discuss maybe joining the team. And lo and behold, several months later, here I am as CEO of VARA starting in January of this year.
Well, congratulations on the new role. And Deepa, would love to hear about your background as well.
Great. So I've been here in Dubai for the last 18 odd years, and background-wise, came from management consulting, used to be with Booz & Company way back when. And more recently with Dubai World Trade Center, I head up their corporate office function. And then also more recently at Dubai Economy and Tourism, I'm the CEO of strategy and future insight there. So this ended up as being a project, like let's look at virtual assets as an industry. What can it contribute to the economy? Ended up being a lot more than a project. I ended up setting up the organization, came in as an entity. End of the first quarter of last year, so almost a year. And yes, that's how I met Henson and a huge bunch of 40 odd entities we've gone through the MVP process with. It's been an exciting ride.
Awesome. Can you unpack VARA a little bit? What exactly is it? What's its remit? And, you said it's been around for a year?
Yeah, almost a year. Almost a year.
Got it.
Yeah.
Can you walk through its remit then?
Sure. So VARA, Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority, right, for the Emirate of Dubai, mainland and free zones, except DIFC, which is the financial free zone of the state, right? We were established in March, the first week of March of last year. But the concept of regulating virtual assets has been in the works for a while with the government and looking at an industry that is clearly boomerang, right, grown phenomenally over the last decade or so. And we'd been waiting for global regulators to have a very clear perspective on how they wanted to regulate the industry so we could come in and participate actively, right, and helping it scale, grow, escalate for the region. And over time, particularly as we hit COVID and then coming out of it, as one considered the economy and growth engines for revival and sustainability, virtual assets came up as part of the wider Dubai economy conversation. Naturally, this became an area of saying, hey, doesn't look like there's a solid regulatory guidance globally, and perhaps it's something that we should take on more actively from our end. And that's really initiated the birth of virtual assets. If you may be familiar with Dubai 2033, just recently launched, this is our game plan for the next 10 years, right? Where's the economy going to grow? A large chunk of that is new economy, virtual assets, and the future economy. And very much metaverse, Web3, virtual assets, AI form part of that. That's really where VARA came into being. The concept of VARA, that's how we got established last year.
Thanks. Yep, I've been around for a while and I've spoken to many, many regulators, and I think they'll all universally agree that the best regulation is principles-based. Would love for you to explain how you think about the principles within your regulation and which principles do you want to prioritize?
I'm going to let Henson take a stab at it. Please go ahead, Henson.
Great. So, Chris, great question. And the principles-based approach, as we think about our regulatory framework, which is somewhat an elegant or nuanced solution, is that there are certain thresholds, very high thresholds that we think any operator, any financial institution to be in the space needs to adopt. And that is something that we developed in coordination with conversations with other global regulators, as well as industry subject matter experts and participants in the ecosystem, which is that there needs to be certain corporate structure and governance, capital, insurance, supervision, board supervision, as well as compliance, KYC, AML, FATF compliance, market conduct, information and technology, preservation of client info. All of this is really bare basics that we think is compulsory or fundamental pillars of anybody being an operator in the space. And so what we tried to construct here is something that would be passportable or portable to other jurisdictions and really passes the highest threshold, highest bar for all tier one jurisdictions. From there, we look at rule books around specific activities in the space, be that exchange, broker-dealer, custody, borrowing and lending, et cetera. And so if we have people who are broadly compliant and operationally secure, then we license them for a particular activity. But the basic principles are that we're constructing an ecosystem that is compliant and secure and affords investor protections, which is something that's greatly needed after the news events of 2022.
Congratulations on the release of the highly anticipated Virtual Assets and Related Activities Regulation 2023. Can you walk us through these regulations and the processes put in place for license?
Sure. You want me to go?
Yeah, Deepa, that'd be great.
I know that Henson was just talking about the principles-based approach that we had to regulations here, and one of the things that in the conversations, even as Comaino was coming on board, right, in Henson's previous life, not so long ago, 9 months ago, we were discussing what global regulators have looked to accomplish here and the positives, the huge strides that have been made, versus also where gaps have continued to prevail, right? And where they need to be plugged. The important thing for us is interoperability, right? Is passportability, is the fact that we're trying to find commonalities rather than be too different. But at the same time, also find areas where it clearly doesn't work for this industry because it's not custom created for virtual assets, right? It's about saying, here's traditional finance and some things that have worked. There are also things that need to be nuanced and created separately for an industry in order to be able to foster innovation, to be able to take it to that next level and be part of the new economy, right? And that's really the construct with which Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority was conceived to begin with, and the regulations around it have been developed, right? And to that end, what you will find is the way the regs are structured. You've got a baseline set of compulsory rule books, and here's sort of the house of a chart, if you will. And that's a box standard. Doesn't matter what activity you do, these are standard rules that you would have to abide by. And then very activity-specific ones that would be custom created for the industry you want to operate in and the services that you want to offer to the sector. That's broadly the way it's been constructed. Principles of which uncompromisable in terms of investor protection, market assurance, risk, conduct, and so on, FATF compliance. Those are the things that are absolute baselines, cannot be sort of, confounded with, right? So that's broadly it. I'm going to take a pause there and let Henson jump in.
Yeah, and Chris, it's a great question. And then when we think about what we put together and looking back at maybe what went wrong in 2022, there's some very obvious investor disclosures that should have been better vented. So when you think of some of the earn or yield product and people thinking that they had deposits that meant one thing when in fact they meant something completely different. When we think about assets for clients in custody and the protection that's afforded to them if something like an exchange platform goes down, or disclosures about market makers on exchanges and whether that's affiliated with the exchange or not. These are some very obvious principles in hindsight that we think a regulatory framework should shed light on, and also have an investor protection framework around that affords those protections at the beginning of the day.
Right, so we have a number of portfolio companies. Many of them are global. To the extent that they wanted to apply for a license in Dubai, can you walk through the process? How long does it take? And what kind of steps would they have to pursue?
I can start on that. We have 3 cohorts right now that we're going to be dealing with since we launched our final rule books 2 or 3 days ago. One is the MVP cohort, 40 or 50 VASPs that have been instrumental in collaborating with us and thinking about these rule books to get them out with something that is that sort of very high threshold that we discussed in concert with them, as well as other global regulators and international subject matter experts. And so how they migrate from MVP into getting a FMP license will take course between now and the end of June. There's also a number of legacy VASPs that are already operating here that we will be processing as to whether they're doing an activity that requires a license, and how we do a business transition license for that, business transition policy for them to get fully licensed by over the next 6 months, permit with the word up, business transition permit. And then of course there's the new applicants, which we're also very excited about. And so there'll be facts on our website, VARA.ae, as far as getting access to the portal, beginning a license process, and submitting the information that we'll need in order to process an FMP license for any or all of those 7 or 8 activities.
Thank you.
I think I just want to add one thing to the point that Henson just raised. It's we've seen, I mean, 2020 hindsight, right? Global regulators needing to go to multiple parties in order to get one license for an entity. And that's one thing that we were hoping to be able to do differently in our context, right? So you use us as your single point of call, right? The single port of entry. And whilst there will be other regulators within the ecosystem we'll have to get approvals and sanctions from, we would try and facilitate that process for you in as streamlined a fashion as we can.
Great. How have these regulations been received? I mean, they just came out. What feedback have you gotten thus far? Henson, you want to take that?
Sure. The feedback's been incredibly positive, and Deepa and I joke a little bit, careful what we wish for, or even when we were congratulating the team on a job really well done, which really we had sprint 0 to get this out timeframe that we did. Remember, Deepa launched this as a project in March of last year, and here we are in February with a final rule book. It's unprecedented. The first virtual asset regulator, and then the first virtual asset regulations. It's been incredible. But then we joke, all we've done is created an incredible amount of work for us, because now we have to process a huge amount of licenses with those cohorts I just mentioned.
Yes.
And careful what you wish for. As we make people operational, then we have to advise them and have enforcement as well. So it went from an idea to a project to a launch to something that gets incredibly complex, which we're very excited about.
Yeah, the timeline's unprecedented, and congratulations again. So next question, when you run around to different jurisdictions, a lot of times you'll find that the regulation is consistent, but it's never identical. Laws are different. Could you tease out, some of the differences that you would expect, whether you're operating in Dubai versus like a MiCA in Europe? I know the UK is working on something. How do you think about the differences that we would see in Dubai?
Look, when we constructed this sort of idea, right? The first thing was, and I mentioned this earlier, interoperability, fundamental, right? At the end of the day, Dubai, UAE overall is about 10 million people as a market. And you really want virtual assets to be for the rest of the world. It's not really about what's happening within our economy. Our economy is the base plate facilitating industries, companies to be able to do business with the rest of the world, right? So in that sense, global passporting becomes quite key. And when you look at the global jurisdictions that you want to be comparable with, it would largely be the SEC, CFTC. As far as the US is concerned, you've got, as you rightly mentioned, there is MiCA, there is obviously PAF and FINMA, as well as FCA from a European context. And then there's Asia. Whilst it may have gone a little bit on sort of a halt right now, they are going to come back, and they're going to come back pretty strong. But whether it's Japan, Singapore, or Hong Kong, right? And so you look at all these global jurisdictions, traditional financial services hubs, right? And the security standards that they absolutely must abide by. And to say, or I've got to stick to those standards, what are the absolute must-haves? And then what are the tweaks you can make, the adjustments you can make in order for it to be super customized to virtual assets? A 24/7 economy that is borderless and allows for that level of fungibility, if you will, of rules that you're setting, right, with the newer standard. So that's very much the baseline of how we've thought about it. Chin mentioned a little bit earlier, it's not product-based, it's technology agnostic to a large extent. So it allows you the ability to keep pace with the change of activities that are happening within the market. And at the same time, do it extremely activity-based, because there isn't that much that's going to be different, right, from an activity construct perspective.
It
So
makes so much.
find,
This concept of substitute compliance and passporting makes so much sense. I really, really hope that you're successful. I can only imagine how lucky, a portfolio company would be to be able to be licensed in VARA and then for it to apply globally. Because like I said, like you said, everything we do in crypto is instantaneously global. So it's I'm so glad that you're thinking about that. And I really hope that it plays out like that. Henson, just stepping back, when you think about Dubai as a hub, how do you see its future as it relates to virtual assets? Where do you see it 5 years from now?
Another great question, Chris. And not only, and so crypto and virtual assets and this regulatory authority is clearly part of a broader plan or mission or vision for Dubai. And of course, there's the GDP 2033 vision and plan, which people can certainly find. Coming here last March and spending a week here, and we talk about cities being business friendly and citizen friendly. We talk about tax regimes, regulatory regimes being sound but commercial. There's a level of energy and excitement here that is really palpable, and this is a part of that, but not the only thing. And in talking with some of my OG friends in the crypto space, we think about 5 or 10 years ago, where really a lot of the technology innovation was going on within 8 miles of the Starbucks on Sand Hill Road. And yeah, it was sort of a virtual world, but if you weren't sitting there to hear the coffee conversation, you might miss out on some of the most interesting, cool things. There's a lot of macro reasons why a lot of that innovation is no longer going on in the San Francisco Bay Area, in the US, maybe being pushed overseas. I'm not the person who invented that thesis, but you can hear it. And so, really over the next 5 to 10 years, this will be an innovation hub. It's not just having a regulatory frameworks for TradFi to get into crypto. It's about innovation and new technologies and Web 3.0. And this framework and building block is also going to have a sandbox so that it can adapt and adjust to new technologies. We're technology agnostic, but 5 to 10 years from now, you might just want to be at the Starbucks in Dubai as opposed to the one on Sand Hill Road.
As we wrap up the session, are there any last thoughts that you have around messages that you deliver to companies that are looking to do business in Dubai?
And look, what I will say is right at the start of the session, we mentioned Dubai 2033, the D33 plan. And this is one economy that in the next 10 years, so by 2033, we're basically looking to have at least 50% of the GDP growth come from innovation and digital transformation, right? That's substantive. I mean, that's half of your economy coming to about 100 billion or so per annum, right? And a significant chunk of that from metaverse, Web3, AI, and virtual assets. So if there's a place that you want to be at, not only at the IP side of things, but also taking it to market, this is probably where you want to be.
Henson and Deepa, thank you so much for joining us today. All the best and good luck as you launch your license regime. And thanks again for your leadership globally. Have a great day.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
having us.